On that clear autumn morning, nobody thought much of Rusty's strange behavior at first after all. Golden retrievers were known for their occasional digging habits. But when the normally obedient family dog refused to come inside for his breakfast, and continued frantically pawing at the soil beneath the old wooden porch, his desperate whines growing increasingly urgent, the Miller family finally realized something was terribly wrong. Tom Miller knelt down beside his loyal companion, aiming his flashlight into the shadowy space where Rusty had been digging. When a flicker of movement caught his eye, what he saw in that moment would change their lives forever. Before we continue, this incredible story that reminds us how our animal companions sometimes understand things we cannot. Please subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss any of these extraordinary, true stories that showcase the special bond between humans and animals. Sometimes the smallest hands need the biggest heroes, and this golden retriever was about to become exactly that. Tom Miller's heart stopped when the beam of his flashlight illuminated what was unmistakably a small human hand, partially covered in dirt, beneath his family's porch. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was seeing. Then training from his years as a volunteer firefighter kicked in. "Sarah," he shouted to his wife, his voice cracking with urgency. "Call 911 now. There's a child under here." Inside the house, Sarah Miller had been pouring cereal for their two children, Emma and Noah. When she heard the panic in her husband's voice, she dropped the box, milk splashing across the kitchen counter, and grabbed her phone with trembling hands. "What's happening?" Emma asked, her 10-year-old face scrunched with worry. "Stay inside with Noah," Sarah commanded as she punched in the 3 digits that would summon help. "Don't come out until I say so." Outside, Tom was already on his stomach, reaching into the narrow space where Rusty had been digging. The golden retriever paced anxiously beside him, whining continuously as if urging Tom to hurry. The opening was tight, designed with lattice to keep animals from making homes under the porch. But Rusty had somehow managed to tear away a section large enough for him to partially squeeze through. "I need tools," Tom muttered, straining to reach farther under the porch. He could just barely touch the small hand with his fingertips, confirming his worst fears. It was cold, but definitely human. "Rusty, stay," he commanded as he scrambled to his feet and ran to the garage. He returned seconds later with a shovel and crowbar. With desperate strength, he pried away the lattice, creating a larger opening. Rusty immediately tried to squeeze through, but Tom held him back. "No, boy, you've done your part. Now let me do mine." As Tom began carefully digging around where he'd seen the hand, Sarah emerged from the house, her face pale with shock. "Ambulance is on the way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tom, what is it? What did you see?" "There's a child buried under our porch," he replied, not stopping his methodical digging. "I don't know how, I don't know who, but Rusty found them." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, is it ... Are they ... I don't know," Tom said grimly. "I can only see a hand." Rusty continued pacing, occasionally nudging Tom as if directing him where to dig. It was uncanny how the dog seemed to understand exactly what was happening. When Tom paused to wipe sweat from his brow despite the cool autumn air, Rusty barked sharply, as if telling him there was no time to waste. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the quiet neighborhood. Just as Tom exposed more of what lay beneath the porch, a small arm attached to the tiny hand, and then the curve of a shoulder. The child was face down, partially buried in the soft earth. "There's someone here, under the porch," Sarah called out as the first responders rounded the corner of their house, directed by neighbors who had come outside at the sound of sirens. 2 paramedics rushed forward while a police officer hung back slightly, taking in the scene with a professional eye. One of the paramedics, a woman with short dark hair, immediately dropped to her knees beside Tom. "How long has the child been here?" she asked, already pulling on gloves. "We don't know," Tom replied, his voice shaking. "Our dog just started digging this morning and wouldn't stop. That's when we found ... this." The paramedic nodded, her face grave. "I need to get in there and assess. Can you keep digging around the body carefully while I try to check for signs of life?" Tom nodded, moving to expose more of the small form while the paramedic delicately reached in to place her fingers against the child's neck, searching for a pulse. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Even Rusty went still, his intelligent eyes fixed on the paramedic's face. "I've got a pulse," she announced. "It's weak, but it's there. This child is alive." A collective exhale seemed to ripple through the growing crowd of neighbors and emergency personnel. "We need to get them out immediately," the paramedic continued, "but we have to be extremely careful. We don't know what injuries they might have, or how long they've been here." The second paramedic was already unfolding a backboard while the police officer began stringing yellow tape around the perimeter of the yard, keeping the curious neighbors at bay. Tom continued digging with renewed urgency, but also increased caution. Mindful of the precious life they were trying to save, Sarah stood nearby, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold herself together. Rusty had finally settled. lying at the edge of the excavation with his head on his paws, watching intently as more of the child was revealed, a small body in dirt-covered pajamas that looked to be sized for a toddler. "It's a little boy," the paramedic said softly as they carefully brushed away soil from the child's head, revealing matted blonde hair. "Can't be more than 2 or 3 years old." With agonizing slowness, they worked to free the child from his earthen prison. The boy's face was pale beneath smudges of dirt, his eyes closed, lips tinged with blue, but his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, a miracle, given the circumstances. Once they had fully excavated around him, the paramedics worked in perfect tandem to stabilize his neck and spine before gently rolling him onto the backboard. The boy's clothes were damp from the ground's moisture, his body alarmingly cold to the touch. Severe hypothermia, the first paramedic noted as they quickly wrapped him in special thermal blankets. Dehydration, possibly internal injuries. "We need to move now." As they lifted the backboard, Rusty rose to his feet, taking a step forward as if to follow. "Your dog saved this child's life," the second paramedic told Tom as they began carrying the boy toward the waiting ambulance. "Another few hours in this cold ground, ... He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood what had nearly happened, what would have happened if not for Rusty's persistence. From the window of the house, Emma and Noah watched wide-eyed as the paramedics carried the small form to the ambulance. Sarah, seeing their frightened faces, hurried inside to comfort them, while Tom spoke briefly with the police officer who had begun taking notes on the scene. "We have no idea who he is or how he got there," Tom explained, running a hand through his hair in disbelief. "We've lived here for 5 years. The porch was built 3 years ago. There's no way," he trailed off. "The implications too horrible to voice." The officer nodded grimly. "We'll need to take statements from everyone and process this entire area. This is now a crime scene, Mr. Militar." As the ambulance pulled away, lights flashing but sirens mercifully silent, Tom looked down at Rusty, who had returned to his side. The golden retriever's fur was caked with dirt, his paws raw from digging. But there was something in his eyes that seemed almost human in its understanding. Tom knelt and wrapped his arms around his dog's neck. "Good boy," he whispered, voice breaking. "You're such a good boy." The ambulance tore through the quiet suburban streets, carrying its tiny patient toward Mercy Children's Hospital. Inside, paramedics worked frantically to stabilize the toddler, their movements precise despite the vehicle's speed. They had inserted N4 to begin addressing his severe dehydration and wrapped his small body in specialized warming blankets to combat the hypothermia that had set in during his time beneath the earth. "Core temp is 93.2, one paramedic reported, concern evident. In her voice, pulse is weak but steady at 98. "How long do you think he was down there?" her partner asked as he gently cleaned dirt from the boy's face, revealing pale skin with a concerning bluish tint. "Based on his condition, at least overnight, maybe longer," she replied. "It's a miracle that dog found him when it did." Back at the Miller home, the peaceful neighborhood had transformed into a hive of activity. 3 police cars, a crime scene van, and a detective's unmarked sedan now lined the street. Yellow tape cordoned off the entire front yard, with a specific focus on the area around the porch where Rusty had made his discovery. Inside, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with Emma and Noah, trying to explain what was happening in terms they could understand without frightening them further. "A little boy was hurt and hiding under our porch," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Rusty heard him, or smelled him, and that's why he was digging so much." "Is the boy going to be okay?" Emma asked, her 10-year-old face serious with concern. Sarah hesitated. "The doctors are doing everything they can to help him. Why was he under our house?" 7-year-old Noah wondered, his eyes wide. "We don't know yet, sweetheart," Sarah answered. "Honestly, the police are trying to figure that out." Through the window, they could see Tom in the front yard, Rusty by his side, speaking with a detective. The golden retriever hadn't left Tom's side since the ambulance departed, as if sensing his human needed support. Occasionally, Tom would absently stroke Rusty's head, the simple gesture seeming to ground him amid the chaos. Officer Garcia, the first police responder on the scene, approached the house and knocked gently on the door. Sarah let him in, offering coffee, which he accepted gratefully. "We'll need to take official statements from everyone," he explained, his tone professional but kind, "including the children, if that's okay. Sometimes kids notice things adults miss." Sarah nodded, though her protective instincts bristled at the thought of her children being questioned. "Can you tell us anything about the little boy?" Garcia's expression softened slightly. "The hospital reports he's stable but critical. Severely dehydrated and hypothermic, as you'd expect. Some bruising on his arms and torso. They're running tests now to check for internal injuries or other trauma." "Does anyone know who he is?" Sarah asked, her voice dropping to ensure the children wouldn't hear. Garcia shook his head. "No identification, obviously. We're checking missing persons reports now. Detective Morales is heading up the investigation." He nodded toward the window where a woman in plain clothes was now examining the area beneath the porch. At Mercy Children's Hospital, a team of doctors and nurses worked efficiently around the small form on the trauma room bed. Dr. Elena Ramirez, the pediatric emergency specialist on duty, called out orders as monitors beeped steadily in the background. I want a full panel of blood work, head tudo, CT scan, and page pediatric psych. When he wakes up, he's going to be terrified. If he wakes up, a nurse murmured. Dr. Ramirez shot her a sharp look. He will. This little fighter survived being buried alive. He's not giving up now, and neither are we. As they worked the police, officers stood quietly in the corner of the trauma room, waiting for any clues to the child's identity or how he ended up buried beneath a family's porch. So far, the toddler's clothes offered no help. Simple blue pajamas with dinosaurs, available at any department store, no name tag or identifying features. Back in the Millers neighborhood, word had spread quickly. Neighbors gathered at the edge of the police tape, whispering theories to each other. Some brought coffee and sandwiches for the officers working the scene. Others simply stood in silent vigil, processing the horror of what had been discovered in their peaceful community. Deborah Williams, who lived 2 doors down, approached Tom as he stood watching the crime scene technicians work. "How are you holding up?" she asked, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Tom shook his head slightly. "I keep thinking about how many times I've walked across that porch in the last day. Sat on the steps having coffee yesterday morning, all while that child was. He couldn't finish the sentence. Rusty pressed against his leg, as if offering comfort, and Tom automatically reached down to scratch behind the dog's ears. "Rusty's the real hero," he said after a moment. "If he hadn't been so persistent. Double quotes. Deborah nodded, tears in her eyes. "Everyone's saying so. He's a special dog." Inside the house, Detective Angela Morales had joined Officer Garcia at the kitchen table. Her approach with the children was gentle but direct. "Emma, Noah, I need your help," she said, kneeling to their level. "I need to know if you saw or heard anything unusual around your house recently. Maybe someone you didn't recognize, or strange noises at night." Emma shook her head. "I didn't see anybody." "Me neither," Noah added, then paused. "But Rusty was barking really late last night. Dad thought it was just raccoons." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's right. It was around midnight." Tom checked the backyard but didn't see anything. Detective Morales made a note. "And where was Rusty barking?" "The front yard, backyard, front," Noah said confidently. "By the porch. I heard him from my room." Morales exchanged a significant look with Garcia. "The boy might have been placed there last night," she said quietly. "Rusty probably heard or smelled something then." "You mean someone came to our house in the middle of the night and buried a child under our porch?" Sarah whispered, horror dawning on her face. "We don't know that for certain yet," Morales cautioned, "but it's a possibility we have to consider." As the detective continued questioning the family, the hospital staff had managed to stabilize their young patient. His body temperature was slowly rising, the 4 fluids addressing his dehydration, though still unconscious. His vital signs had improved markedly in the hour since his arrival. Dr. Ramirez was examining his arms when she noticed something. A small medical alert bracelet partially hidden by dirt and the hospital's own identification. Carefully cleaning it, she revealed a name and a phone number. "We have an ID," she called out, immediately reaching for the phone. "His name is Jamie Parker. He's 2.5 years old." Within minutes, the hospital's call triggered a flurry of activity at the police station in the neighboring county of Greenfield, 30 miles away. Jamie Parker had been reported missing 18 hours earlier by his frantic parents, who had put him to bed the night before, only to find his room empty in the morning. As the 2 investigations connected, a new question emerged: how had a toddler from Greenfield ended up buried beneath a porch in Oakwood, and who had put him there? As the investigation into Jamie Parker's mysterious appearance beneath the Millers' porch intensified, Rusty had finally been allowed to come inside and rest. The golden retriever lay on his bed in the corner of the living room, his mission accomplished, but his watchful eyes still tracking every movement in the house. Tom sat on the floor beside him, gently cleaning the dirt from his paws with a warm washcloth. "You know, when we first got him, I never imagined he'd end up saving someone's life," Tom said to Sarah, who was bringing a bowl of water for the exhausted dog. "Tell the kids the story," Detective Morales suggested from her seat at the dining table where she was organizing her notes. "I'd like to hear about Rusty's background too. Sometimes it helps to go back to the beginning." Tom nodded, gesturing for Emma and Noah to sit with him on the floor near Rusty. The children needed distraction from the commotion outside, and Detective Morales was right. Understanding Rusty might provide context for his remarkable behavior today. "Remember when we went to the Golden Retriever rescue 3 years ago?" Tom began, his voice taking on the warmth of a storyteller. "We weren't actually looking for a dog at all." Emma nodded eagerly. "We were just dropping off the blankets and dog food that Mom collected at her office." "That's right," Tom continued, absently stroking Rusty's golden fur. "We had no intention of adopting, but then this guy was there, recently surrendered by a family who was moving overseas and couldn't take him. He picked us," Noah interjected. "He brought me his tennis ball." Tom smiled at the memory. "He did. The rescue coordinator told us Rusty had been returned twice before because he was too intense. He would fixate on things. She said sounds, smells, movements that no one else noticed. He wasn't destructive, just hyper-aware. Sarah joined them, settling on the couch nearby. I was worried about that intensity at first, especially with the kids. But the coordinator explained that Rusty had originally been trained as a service dog candidate but was released from the program for being too independent-minded, too smart for his own good, Tom added with affection, scratching behind Rusty's ears. The dog closed his eyes in contentment, despite the day's trauma. Were there other instances where Rusty seemed to sense things others couldn't? Detective Morales asked, her pen poised over her notebook. Tom and Sarah exchanged a look. A few, Sarah admitted. Last year, he kept pawing at the wall in the basement. Wouldn't stop until Tom opened it up and found a water leak that would have caused major damage if left undetected. And he always knows when Emma's about to have one of her migraines. Even before she shows any symptoms, Tom added. Emma nodded. Solemnly, he puts his head in my lap and whines, and about an hour later, my head starts hurting. Detective Morales made a note. That's actually quite common in certain dogs. There are studies suggesting they can detect chemical changes in the human body that precede medical events. Some can even smell certain cancers. I read something about that, Sarah said. Dogs trained to detect seizures before they happen, or dangerously low blood sugar in diabetics. Exactly, Morales confirmed. Their sense of smell is estimated to be somewhere between 10,000 to 100,000 times more sensitive than ours, depending on the breed. At that moment, Officer Garcia entered the house after conferring with the forensics team outside. They've finished processing the area under the porch. He reported, based on the soil disturbance, they believe the child was placed there sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. That matches when Rusty was barking last night, Sarah said, her arms wrapping around herself as if suddenly cold. Garcia nodded. The working theory is that whoever put the boy there didn't dig very deep because they were in a hurry. They covered him with just enough soil to hide him from immediate view, probably assuming no one would have reason to look under the porch anyway. A heavy silence fell over the room as they all contemplated the cruelty of such an act. Rusty, sensing the shift in mood, lifted his head and whined softly. I've called Dr. Matthews, Sarah said after a moment. She's our veterinarian. She wants to check Rusty over, make sure he didn't injure himself while digging. Good idea, Morales agreed. And it might be helpful to get her professional perspective on Rusty's behavior today. An hour later, Dr. Lisa Matthews was examining Rusty on a blanket in the Millers' living room, having made a house call given the unusual circumstances. Her examination was thorough but gentle, earning appreciative tail thumps from her patient. His paws are abraded from the digging, she explained as she applied a soothing balm to the raw spots. Nothing serious, but he must have been at it for quite a while before you noticed. What about his behavior? Tom asked. How could he know? There was a child under there. Dr. Matthews sat back on her heels, considering the question. Golden retrievers have approximately 300 million olfactory receptors, compared to our 6 million. Their brain dedicates roughly 40 times more space to analyzing smells than ours does. She gestured toward Rusty, who was watching her with intelligent eyes. He could easily detect human scent through several feet of soil. The fact that it was a child might have triggered his protective instincts even more strongly. But why dig? Emma asked. Why not just bark to tell us? Dr. Matthews smiled at the perceptive question. That's the remarkable part. Rusty understood that barking alone wasn't solving the problem. Many dogs would simply alert and then wait for humans to figure it out. He took direct action, which shows exceptional problem-solving ability. He knew the child needed to be uncovered, Sarah said softly. Exactly, Dr. Matthews confirmed. And he persisted until you understood what he was trying to tell you. That's rare, even among highly intelligent breeds. As Dr. Matthews finished treating Rusty's paws, Detective Morales received a call that caused her expression to shift from professional calm to surprise. Are you certain? She asked the caller. I see. Yes, we'll keep that in mind. She ended the call and turned to Officer Garcia. The Parker family claims they have no connection to Oakwood. They've never been here, don't know anyone here, and can't imagine how their son ended up 30 miles from home. That makes this even more puzzling, Garcia replied. If they have no connection to this town, why here? Why this house specifically? Everyone's gaze shifted to the porch, visible through the front window, where forensic technicians were still working. Maybe it wasn't about the house, Tom suggested slowly. Maybe it was just the first suitable hiding place the person found. Detective Morales nodded thoughtfully. Or maybe there is a connection we haven't discovered yet. She turned to Dr. Matthews. In your professional opinion, would Rusty have responded this way to any human buried under the porch? Or is there something specific about a child that might have triggered such an intense response? Dr. Matthews stroked Rusty's head as she considered. Dogs generally have strong protective instincts toward children, even those they don't know. There's also evidence suggesting they can detect human distress through scent, fear, pain, even the chemical changes that occur during hypothermia. She looked down at Rusty, who had closed his eyes under her gentle touch. What Rusty did today wasn't just instinct. It was a series of complex decisions made to save a life. That's extraordinary. By any measure, 30 miles away at Mercy Children's Hospital, Michael and Jennifer Parker burst through the emergency department doors, their faces etched with the particular anguish only parents of a missing child could understand. They had been living a nightmare since discovering Jamie's empty bed 18 hours earlier, nightmare that had somehow led them here, to a hospital in a town they'd never visited, where their son had been found buried alive. Were Jamie Parker's parents, Michael managed to say to the receptionist, his voice breaking. They called us, they said he was here. The receptionist immediately signaled to a nearby social worker who approached with gentle efficiency. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, I'm Carla Mendez. If you'll come with me, I'll take you to Jamie's doctor right away. As they followed her through the corridors, Jennifer clutched her husband's hand with crushing force. How is he? Is he awake? Can we see him? Dr. Ramirez will answer all your questions, Carla assured them. Jamie is stable, which is the most important thing right now. They were led to a small consultation room where Dr. Alina Ramirez waited. The pediatric specialist rose as they entered, her compassionate expression tempered with the professional reserve necessary when delivering difficult news. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, please sit down, she began. Jamie is alive, and his condition has stabilized considerably since his arrival. He's suffering from hypothermia, dehydration, and some minor contusions, but we haven't found evidence of major internal injuries. Jennifer let out a sob of relief, while Michael asked the question foremost in their minds. Is he awake? Does he know what happened to him? Dr. Ramirez shook her head gently. He's still unconscious, though his brain activity appears normal. This is likely his body's way of protecting itself from the trauma. We're monitoring him closely and expect him to regain consciousness within the next 12 to 24 hours. Can we see him, please? Jennifer pleaded. Of course, Dr. Ramirez replied, leading them from the consultation room toward the pediatric intensive care unit. I should prepare you, he's connected to several monitors, and we have an IV providing fluids and medication. It can be alarming for parents to see, but all of this is helping him recover. As they approached Jamie's room, they saw 2 police officers stationed outside, one from Oakwood and one from Greenfield, representing the jurisdictions now collaborating on the investigation. Detective Morales had arrived from the Miller home and was speaking quietly with her Greenfield counterpart, Detective Wilson. Both detectives approached as Dr. Ramirez introduced them to the Parkers. Detective Wilson, who had taken the original missing persons report, spoke first. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, I can't tell you how relieved we are that Jamie has been found alive. Once you've had a moment with your son, we'll need to ask you some additional questions that might help us understand how he ended up in Oakwood. Michael nodded stiffly. Anything you need? We just want to understand what happened to our boy, Detective Morales added. I know this is overwhelming, but anything you can tell us about your movements yesterday? Anyone who might have had access to your home? Even small details that seem unimportant could help us piece this together. Jennifer barely seemed to register their words, her attention fixed on the door to Jamie's room. Dr. Ramirez recognized the mother's need and gently guided the Parkers inside, where their son lay small and still amid the medical equipment. Jamie's blonde hair had been cleaned of dirt, his face peaceful in unconsciousness. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided reassurance that beneath the stillness, life continued. Jennifer rushed to his bedside, carefully taking his tiny hand between hers, while Michael stood frozen in the doorway, visibly struggling to reconcile his vibrant, active son with the pale figure in the hospital bed. Oh, Jamie, Jennifer whispered, tears streaming down her face. Mommy's here now. You're safe. Outside the room, the detectives conferred in low voices. The timeline doesn't make sense, Detective Wilson said. The Parkers put Jamie to bed at 8 p.m. They checked on him at 11 before they went to sleep, and he was fine. They discovered him missing at 6 a.m. when they went to wake him for daycare, and the dog at the Miller house started barking around midnight. Detective Morales added, that gives our suspect a very narrow window to take the child from Greenfield, drive 30 miles to Oakwood, and bury him under a random porch. It wasn't random, Detective Wilson replied grimly. Lab just called from the Parker house. They found dirt on the floor of Jamie's room that preliminarily matches samples from under the Miller's porch. Whoever took him brought that dirt with them specifically to leave at the scene. They wanted us to find the connection. Detective Morales' expression darkened. So this wasn't an attempt to hide the body permanently. They wanted the boy found, but only after he'd suffered. Back in Jamie's room, a nurse had brought chairs for Michael and Jennifer, who now sat on either side of their son's bed, each holding one of his hands. The initial shock was giving way to questions that had no immediate answers. Who would do this? Jennifer asked, her voice hollow. Who would take our baby and bury him alive? We don't have enemies. We're just ordinary people? Michael shook his head, anger beginning to replace his initial shock. When they find who did this, Mr. Paca, Dr. Ramirez interrupted gently from the doorway. The police need to ask you some questions now. It's important for the investigation. Reluctantly, Michael stood. I'll be right back, he promised. Jennifer, Cassina at the top of her head before following Dr. Ramirez out to where the detectives waited. In a small conference room, Detectives Wilson and Morales began their questioning. They started with the basics: Michael and Jennifer's occupations, accountant and kindergarten teacher, respectively, their routine on the day Jamie disappeared, anyone who might have had access to their home. What about your connection to Oakwood? Detective Morales asked. Specifically to the Miller family on Elm Street? Michael looked genuinely confused. I've never heard of them. We don't know anyone in Oakwood. I've only passed through the town a few times on my way to conferences in the city. And you've never been to 1487 Elm Street? Never had any contact with Tom or Sarah Miller? No, never, Michael insisted. I don't understand why someone would take Jamie there specifically. Detective Wilson made a note before asking, has there been anyone unusual showing interest in your family recently? Perhaps at Jamie's daycare, or in your neighborhood? Michael started to shake his head, then hesitated. There was something. Probably nothing. But about 2 weeks ago, Jennifer mentioned a car she'd seen parked across from the daycare several times. She thought it seemed out of place, but when she mentioned it to the daycare director, the car stopped appearing. Do you remember what kind of car? A dark sedan? I think Jennifer would know more. She's the one who noticed it. As the questioning continued, Jamie's room had grown quiet except for the steady rhythm of the monitors. Jennifer sat alone with her son, singing softly to him the same lullaby she'd sung the night before, never imagining it would be the last normal bedtime they would have for a long time. Suddenly, Jamie's eyelids fluttered. Jennifer froze mid, hardly daring to hope. Jamie, baby, can you hear me? His small fingers twitched in her hand, and then, slowly, his eyes opened, confused, frightened, but unmistakably aware. Mommy, he whispered, his voice barely audible. The bad man put me in the dirt. Jamie's words, the bad man put me in the dirt, spread through the hospital like ripples in still water, transforming what might have been dismissed as a tragic accident into something far more sinister. Within minutes, Detectives Morales and Wilson were in his room, joined by a child psychologist named Dr. Meera Patel, who specialized in trauma cases. We need to speak with Jamie, Detective Wilson explained to Jennifer, who had positioned herself protectively between the investigators and her son's bed. But Dr. Patel will guide the conversation to minimize any additional trauma. Jennifer's eyes filled with fresh tears. He's just a baby. He's barely talking in full sentences yet, which is why my presence is essential, Dr. Patel said gently. Children Jamie's age often communicate trauma differently than adults. I'll help interpret what he's able to tell us. Reluctantly, Jennifer moved aside, though she remained within Jamie's sight. Michael had rushed back to the room upon hearing his son was awake, and now stood rigid by the door, as if guarding against further threats. Dr. Patel approached Jamie's bedside with a warm smile, carrying a small backpack. Hi Jamie, my name is Meera. I brought some friends who might help us talk together. She produced a stuffed dog and a family of simple cloth dolls. Would you like to hold the doggy? Jamie reached for the stuffed animal with his hand, clutching it to his chest. Doggy, he murmured. That's right, Dr. Patel encouraged. This doggy is a good listener. Can you tell him what happened when you were sleeping at home? Jamie looked at the stuffed dog, then at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. Bad man came, he said simply. In my room. Detective Wilson, who had positioned himself unobtrusively in the corner, exchanged a glance with Morales. This confirmed their suspicion that Jamie had been taken directly from his home rather than wandering off himself. What did the bad man look like? Dr. Patel asked, keeping her tone conversational. Jamie frowned, struggling with concepts beyond his limited vocabulary. Big black clothes. He touched his own face. Scratchy, he had a beard, Dr. Patel suggested. Jamie nodded. Itchy beard. Jennifer covered her mouth, stifling a sob. Michael moved to her side, putting an arm around her shoulders. And then what happened? Jamie, Dr. Patel continued, offering him the doll family. Did the bad man take you somewhere? Jamie nodded again, his lower lip trembling. Car dark. Then, dirt. His face crumpled. Scared? Cold? Dr. Patel placed a gentle hand on Jamie's arm. You were very brave, and you're safe now. Detective Morales stepped forward slightly. Jamie, did the bad man say anything to you? Any words you remember? Jamie seemed to retreat into himself at the new voice, burying his face against the stuffed dog. Dr. Patel shot the detective a warning look before turning back to the child. It's okay, Jamie. These people are here to help make sure the bad man doesn't hurt anyone else. Can you remember if he said anything? After a long moment, Jamie looked up, said ... Tell Daddy, sorry. Michael froze, his face draining of color. What? Jamie looked at his father with wide, innocent eyes. Bad man said tell Daddy sorry when they find you. The room fell silent, except for the steady beeping of Jamie's monitors. Dr. Patel recognized that they had reached the limit of what Jamie could process, and gently shifted to simple, comforting, play with the stuffed animals, creating a protective buffer between the traumatized child and the now intensified investigation. In the hallway outside, the detectives confronted Michael Parker. This changes everything, Detective Wilson said gravely. This wasn't random. Someone targeted your son specifically to send you a message. Michael shook his head in disbelief. I don't understand. Who would do this? What could I possibly have done to make someone hurt my child? Detective Morales studied him intently. That's what we need to figure out. Is there anyone in your life who believes you've wronged them? Former business partners? Disgruntled clients? No, nothing like that, Michael insisted. I'm an accountant at a small firm. I handle tax returns and basic bookkeeping for local businesses. Nothing high stakes or controversial. What about past clients who might have faced audit or legal issues based on your work? Detective Wilson pressed. Michael hesitated. There was one situation last year. A restaurant owner named Ray Campos. I found some irregularities in his books during a routine audit and had to report them. He lost his business and faced some tax penalties, but that was months ago, and he seemed to understand I was just doing my job. Both detectives made notes. We'll need contact information for Mr. Campos, Detective Morales said. Anyone else? Before Michael could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. Unknown number, he said, then answered cautiously. Hello? The blood drained from his face as he listened. Detective Wilson immediately signaled to a nearby officer, who rushed over with recording equipment. They quickly connected it to Michael's phone as the caller continued speaking. I understand, Michael finally said, his voice surprisingly steady despite his ashen complexion. Yes, I'll do exactly as you say. He ended the call and looked at the detectives with haunted eyes. That was him, the man who took Jamie. What did he say? Detective Morales demanded. He said this was just a warning, that next time, no dog would find Jamie in time. Michael's composure finally broke. He said he knows where we live, where Jamie goes to daycare, what routes we take. He's been watching us for weeks. Did he make any demands? Detective Wilson asked. Michael nodded slowly. He wants me to deliver a package to an address in Oakwood. Tomorrow night, alone, he says if I involve the police, he'll come for Jamie again. His eyes darted between the detectives. But you're already involved. What do I do? Detective Morales placed a steadying hand on Michael's shoulder. We'll set up protection for Jamie and your wife immediately. As for the package delivery, we'll need to proceed carefully. This may be our best chance to catch whoever did this. Back at the Miller home, the initial frenzy of police activity had subsided to a quieter, more methodical investigation. Crime scene technicians had finished processing the area under the porch and were now examining the perimeter of the property for additional evidence. Inside, Sarah sat with Emma and Noah at the kitchen table, helping them process the day's events. Through art technique suggested by the crisis counselor who had visited briefly, Emma was drawing Rusty as a superhero, complete with a cape, while Noah worked on a picture of the ambulance that had taken the dirt boy away. Tom stood at the window watching Rusty, who had insisted on returning to the front yard once the crime scene technicians finished. The golden retriever lay in the grass near the porch, alert and watchful, as if standing guard against further threats. He knows something isn't right, Tom said quietly, as Sarah joined him at the window. I've never seen him this vigilant before. Sarah leaned against him, seeking comfort in his solid presence. Do you think we're safe? What if whoever put that little boy under our porch comes back? Tom put his arm around her. There's an officer stationed outside, and Detective Morales promised additional patrols through the night. He didn't voice his deeper concern that their home, once a place of security and peace, had been violated in a way that might never be undone. That their children's sense of safety had been shattered along with their own. As if reading his thoughts, Sarah whispered, Why our host, Tom? Of all the places they could have hidden that child, why here? Tom had no answer, only a growing suspicion that this nightmare was far from over. Dawn broke over Mercy Children's Hospital, painting Jamie Parker's room in soft golden light. He had slept fitfully through the night, waking several times with frightened cries that broke his parents' hearts anew with each occurrence. Jennifer had remained by his bedside, dozing in the uncomfortable visitor's chair when exhaustion overtook her vigilance. Michael had been convinced to return to their home in Greenfield under police escort to gather clean clothes and Jamie's favorite stuffed elephant, which now lay tucked against the toddler's side. Dr. Ramirez entered quietly, careful not to disturb the sleeping child. His latest lab results look promising, she told Jennifer in hushed tones. His body temperature has normalized, and the 4 fluids have addressed the dehydration. Physically, he's recovering remarkably well, and mentally, Jennifer asked, gently, stroking Jamie's hair. Emotionally, Dr. Ramirez's expression softened with compassion. That's harder to predict, especially at his age. Children are surprisingly resilient, but trauma can manifest in different ways. Dr. Patel will continue working with him, and will provide resources for ongoing support once he's discharged. When will that be? If his progress continues at this rate, possibly tomorrow. We want to monitor him through one more night to ensure there are no complications from the hypothermia. Jennifer nodded gratefully. The thought of taking Jamie home, both relieved and terrified, their house no longer felt safe. But neither did this sterile hospital room where strangers constantly entered and exited. "There's something else you should know," Dr. Ramirez added, her tone becoming more serious. "Your son's story has attracted media attention. We've increased security on this floor and restricted visitor access, but reporters are gathering outside the hospital. The police have asked that you refrain from making any statements for now." Jennifer looked toward the window, suddenly aware of the world beyond this room, a world now intensely curious about her family's private nightmare. "I just want to protect him," she whispered. "That's exactly what you're doing," Dr. Ramirez assured her. "By being here, by making him feel safe." Across town at the Miller residence, Tom emerged from the shower to find Sarah sitting on their bed, staring at her phone with a troubled expression. "What is it?" he asked, toweling his hair dry. She held up the screen to show him a local news website. "We're everywhere," she said simply. The headline read, "Golden Retriever Hero Uncovers Buried Toddler, Saves Life." Beneath it was a photo of their house, the porch prominently featured, and an inset image of Rusty taken from Sarah's social media account. Tom sat heavily on the bed beside her. "How did they get that picture?" "It's public on my Instagram," Sarah replied. "They don't mention our names, at least, just refer to us as the homeowners. But anyone who knows us will recognize Rusty and our house." Tom scanned the article, his frown deepening. "They've got a lot of details about the investigation that I thought were confidential. How Jamie was taken from his home in Greenfield, the deliberate burial." A knock at their bedroom door interrupted him. Emma peeked in, still in her pajamas. "Dad, there are people outside taking pictures of our house." Tom and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances before hurrying to the front window. Sure enough, 3 news vans had parked across the street, and several reporters with cameras stood at the edge of their property, where police tape still cordoned off the area around the porch. Officer Bennett, who had been stationed outside overnight, was attempting to keep them at bay. Rusty stood at alert beside him, watching the strangers with wary eyes. "This is too much," Sarah murmured. "The kids shouldn't have to deal with this on top of everything else." Tom's phone rang. Detective Morales calling with an update. "We've tracked down Ray Campos, the former client Mr. Parker mentioned," she reported. "He has a solid alibi for the night Jamie was taken. Was at a wedding in the city with over 100 witnesses." "So we're back to square one?" Tom asked. "Not entirely. The forensics team found something interesting under your Porch receipt, from a gas station just outside Oakwood. It's dated the night Jamie was taken, timestamp 11:42 p.m. We're retrieving security footage now. Do you think that will identify whoever did this?" "It's our best lead so far," Morales confirmed. "In the meantime, I see the media has discovered your address. We can arrange for an officer to keep them off your property." "Thank you," Tom said, watching another news van pull up. "We'd appreciate that." At Mercy Children's Hospital, Jamie had awakened and was showing signs of improvement that amazed his doctors. He sat up in bed, picking at a breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, while a child life specialist named Becky engaged him with simple games designed to assess his cognitive function. "You're doing great, Jamie," Becky encouraged as he correctly identified shapes on colorful cards. "Can you show me the circle?" Jamie pointed confidently, then reached for his cup of apple juice. His movements were still somewhat sluggish, but his coordination was steadily returning to normal. Dr. Patel observed from the doorway, making notes on her tablet. "Remarkable resilience," she murmured to Jennifer, who stood beside her. "Cognitively, he appears unaffected by the oxygen deprivation he experienced. He seems almost normal," Jennifer said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Like himself again." Children his age often process trauma differently than adults, Dr. Patel explained. They may compartmentalize the experience or express it through behavior rather than words. Watch for changes in his sleep patterns, regression in toilet training, increased clinginess, or unusual fears. As if on cue, Jamie suddenly froze, his eyes widening at something outside the window. "Doggy," he said, pointing. Jennifer followed his gaze to see a therapy dog being walked past their room in the hallway, a golden retriever, similar to Rusty. "Yes, that's a doggy," she confirmed. "Good doggy," Jamie insisted, becoming animated. "Digging doggy saved Jamie." Dr. Patel moved closer, intrigued by this unexpected connection. "Jamie, did you see a dog like that one?" Jamie nodded vigorously. "Digging found Jamie in the dirt." Jennifer and Dr. Patel exchanged surprised glances. "He must have been at least partially conscious when Rusty found him," Dr. Patel theorized. "This could be significant both for his recovery and for the investigation." In the hospital conference room that had been designated as a temporary command center, Detectives Morales and Wilson reviewed security footage from the gas station where the receipt had been found. The grainy black and white video showed a man in a dark hooded sweatshirt entering at 11:39 p.m., purchasing only a bottle of water and paying in cash. "Can't see his face," Detective Wilson muttered in frustration. "He keeps his head down, away from the cameras. But look at this." Morales pointed to a timestamp from 3 minutes later. The same hooded figure exited the station and walked to a dark sedan parked near the edge of the frame. As he opened the driver's door, the interior light briefly illuminated the back seat, where a small form lay motionless, covered with what appeared to be a blanket. Wilson inhaled sharply. That's him. That's Jamie. Morales was already reaching for her phone. We need to enhance this footage immediately and get the license plate number from that car. Back at the Miller home, Tom had taken Emma and Noah to their grandparents' house to escape the media attention. Sarah remained behind. With Rusty, who had refused to leave the property despite multiple attempts to coax him into the car, he's still on guard duty, Sarah explained when Tom called to check in. I think he senses this isn't over yet. She sat on the living room floor beside the golden retriever, her hand resting on his back. Outside, reporters occasionally approached the door until Officer Bennett intervened. Through it all, Rusty remained alert, his eyes frequently returning to the porch where he had made his life-saving discovery. You're a hero, you know that, Sarah told him softly. They're calling you that on the news, the hero dog who saved a life. Rusty's ears perked up at her voice, but his attention remained divided, comforted by her presence, yet unable to fully relax his vigilance. Something in his continuing alertness sent a chill through Sarah. Maybe he's right, she thought. Maybe this isn't over yet. Detective Morales knelt beneath the Miller's porch, flashlight in hand, searching for anything the forensics team might have missed. Enhanced security footage from the gas station had revealed a partial license plate, narrowing their search to approximately 200 vehicles in the Tri-County area. But something still bothered her about this case. Why this specific house? Why this particular porch? Find anything? Detective Wilson asked, crouching down to join her. Morales shook her head, just trying to understand the mindset. The perpetrator took significant risk bringing Jamie here. Why not bury him in the woods or a vacant lot where discovery would be less likely? Wilson considered this. Maybe that was the point. Maybe he wanted Jamie to be found, just not too quickly. But why here specifically? Morales insisted, sweeping her flashlight across the underside of the porch. There has to be a connection we're missing. Sarah Miller appeared in the doorway, watching the detectives with concern. Can I help somehow? Maybe provide information about the house? Morales emerged from beneath the porch, brushing dirt from her knees. Actually, yes. How long have you lived here, Mrs. Miller? 5 years, Sarah replied. We bought it from an elderly couple, the Hansons, who were moving to Florida for retirement. And the porch. Tom built it 3 years ago. The original was rotting and unsafe. Detective Wilson made a note. Do you know anything about the history of the house before the previous owners? Anything unusual? Sarah hesitated. Not really. It was built in the 1960s, I think. We have some documents from when we bought it, property surveys, inspection reports. Would those help? Possibly, Morales nodded. Anything that might tell us why someone would target this specific location. Inside, Sarah retrieved a folder from their home office. As the detectives reviewed the paperwork, Rusty remained at her side, his behavior still unusually vigilant. Occasionally, his ears would prick forward at sounds outside, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Your dog still seems on edge, Wilson observed. Sarah stroked Rusty's head. He hasn't relaxed since finding Jamie. It's like he's expecting something else to happen. Morales glanced up from the property records. Animals often sense things we don't. Has he been focusing on any particular area of the house? Mostly the front, near the porch, Sarah replied, though he did bark at the basement door last night, which was strange. The detectives exchanged looks. Mind if we take a look at your basement? Morales asked. The basement of the Miller home was like many others in the neighborhood, concrete floors, exposed beams, washer and dryer in one corner, storage boxes stacked along the walls. Rusty followed them down the stairs, his body language tense. What did the Hansons tell you about the house when you bought it? Wilson asked, scanning the space with practiced eyes. Not much, Sarah admitted. They'd lived here about 15 years. Mentioned it was a solid home, good construction, nothing unusual. Morales moved to the far wall, where Rusty now stood, sniffing intently at what appeared to be a sealed door with concrete blocks filling what had once been an opening. Was this always like this? She asked, examining the newer-looking mortar between older blocks. Sarah frowned. I think so. I never really noticed it before, she called to Rusty, but the dog ignored her. Pawing at the sealed doorway, Wilson ran her fingers along the edge of the blockage. This was done fairly recently, maybe 10-15 years ago. Definitely not original to the house. Morales was already on her phone, requesting a forensics team with ground-penetrating radar equipment. We need to know what's behind this wall, she explained to Sarah, whose face had paled with sudden understanding. You don't think there couldn't be ... It's probably nothing, Wilson said reassuringly, though her expression suggested otherwise. But we need to be thorough. At Mercy Children's Hospital, Michael Parker sat with Jamie while Jennifer finally went to the cafeteria for a much-needed break. The toddler was improving remarkably. now sitting up and coloring with crayons provided by the child life specialist. His doctors were discussing discharge plans for the following day, impressed by his rapid physical recovery. "Daddy, bad man had pictures," Jamie said suddenly, not looking up from his drawing. Michael froze. "What pictures?" "Buddy, of our house." "And Daddy's work?" Jamie continued coloring, seemingly unbothered by this revelation. "In his car, lots of pictures." Michael immediately texted Detective Wilson, relaying this new information. Jamie's disclosure confirmed their suspicion that he had been stalked. His family's movements studied carefully before the abduction, but it also suggested a level of planning that was deeply disturbing. Back at the Miller house, the forensics team had arrived with specialized equipment to examine the sealed doorway in the basement. Sarah had been asked to wait upstairs while they worked. Rusty refused to leave the basement, watching intently as technicians set up their equipment. Ground-penetrating radar shows a void behind this wall, the lead technician reported after several minutes. Approximately 8 by 10 feet. Could be an old coal room, or storage area, or something else entirely, Morales said grimly. "We need to open it up." As they prepared to remove the concrete blocks, Sarah's phone rang. It was Tom, checking in from his parents' house. "How are things going?" he asked. "Are the reporters still camped outside?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to share about the current development. "They're still here, but keeping their distance. The detectives are still investigating. They found something in the basement they want to check." "What kind of something?" Tom asked, his voice sharpening with concern. Before Sarah could respond, a shout from the basement made her jump. "I need to go," she told Tom quickly. "I'll call you back." She rushed downstairs to find the forensics team had removed several blocks from the sealed doorway, creating an opening large enough to shine lights inside. The expressions on their faces made her stomach clench with dread. "Mrs. Miller, I think you should wait upstairs," Detective Morales said firmly, moving to intercept her. But Sarah had already seen what lay beyond the wall, a small room, long, sealed off, its concrete floor disturbed by what appeared to be shallow exhibitions, and on the far wall, barely visible in the flashlight beams, photographs, dozens of them, yellowed with age but clearly showing children. "What is this?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "What's happening in my house?" Detective Wilson guided her back toward the stairs. "We don't know yet, but it appears your home may have a history we need to uncover. A history that might explain why Jamie Parker was brought here specifically." Rusty had pushed past them into the hidden room, sniffing the disturbed areas of the floor with growing agitation. His behavior, once mysterious, now took on a horrifying new context. "He knows," Sarah said numbly. "Somehow, he knows what happened here." Upstairs, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. Outside, more police vehicles had arrived, drawing renewed attention from the media gathered at the perimeter of the property. Her phone rang again. Tom, worried by her abrupt end to their previous call. With shaking hands, she answered. "Sarah, what's going on?" She took a deep breath, struggling to keep her voice steady. "They found a sealed room in the basement, Tom, with pictures of children on the walls. They think something terrible might have happened in our house. A long time ago." The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Their home, the place where they had built their life, raised their children, created countless happy memories, harbored dark secrets neither of them could have imagined. "I'm coming home," Tom said finally. "Right now." As Sarah ended the call, Detective Morales appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression grave. "Mrs. Miller, we've identified the former owner who sealed up that room. His name was Edward Brennan. He owned this house from 1985 to 2003, before selling to the hand." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Brennan died in prison 5 years ago while serving a sentence for child endangerment, but he had a son, Daniel Brennan, who was recently released from prison after serving time for similar offenses." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "And you think this son is the one who took Jamie, who buried him under our porch?" Morales nodded grimly. "We're working on that theory. Daniel Brennan matches the general description Jamie provided, and his last known vehicle is a dark sedan, similar to the one in the gas station footage. But why Jamie specifically? Why the Parkers? That's what we still need to figure out. But one thing seems increasingly clear. Jamie's burial under your porch wasn't random. It was meant as some kind of message, possibly connected to whatever happened in that sealed room." Daniel Brennan sat in the interview room at the Oakwood police station, his bearded face impassive as detectives Morales and Wilson studied him from across the table. They had found him at a motel just outside of town, taken into custody without incident. The dark sedan parked outside his room matched the partial plate from the gas station footage, and a search had revealed dirt-stained clothes stuffed in a trash bag in the trunk. "We know you took Jamie Parker," Detective Morales said, placing photographs from the crime scene on the table. "We have your dirt-covered clothes, soil samples matching the Miller property, and the gas station footage showing you with Jamie in your car." Brennan remained silent, his eyes briefly flickering to the photos before returning to some middle distance, unfocused. "What we don't understand," Detective Wilson continued, "is why. Why Jamie Parker? Why that house specifically? A slight smile curved Brennan's lips, but still he said nothing. Is it because of your father? Morales pressed. Because of what happened in that house? In that room he sealed up in the basement? At the mention of his father, Brennan's expression shifted, something dark passing behind his eyes before he controlled it. You found the room, he said finally, his voice surprisingly soft for such a large man. Yes, Wilson confirmed. We found the photographs, the disturbed areas in the concrete. Brennan leaned forward slightly. Then you know. We know your father, Edward Brennan, was convicted of child endangerment. Morales said carefully. We know he owned the house on Elm Street from 1985 to 2003. What we don't know is what happened in that room, or why you would return there to bury Jamie Parker beneath the porch. Brennan's eyes narrowed. You haven't connected all the dots yet, have you? You haven't figured out who Michael Parker really is. The detectives exchanged glances. Explain it to us, Wilson encouraged. Brennan sat back, studying them as if deciding whether they were worthy of his revelation. Finally, he spoke. Michael Parker was once Michael Brennan, my little brother, at Mercy Children's Hospital. Michael sat beside Jamie's bed, reading him a story as they waited for Jennifer to return from speaking with Dr. Ramirez about discharge plans. A knock at the door interrupted them. Detective Morales, her expression grim. Mr. Parker, I need to speak with you privately, she said. Michael frowned. Can it wait? Jamie's finally settled? I'm afraid not, Morales insisted. It concerns your brother, Daniel Brennan? Michael's face drained of color. He kissed Jamie's forehead before stepping into the hallway, pulling the door nearly closed behind him. How did you find out? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel told us, Morales replied. After we arrested him for Jamie's abduction, Michael closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself against the wall. I haven't used the name Brennan in over 20 years. I legally changed it after everything that happened. You need to tell me everything, Morales said. Daniel claims this was about revenge because you testified against your father, resulting in his conviction. He says you betrayed your family. Michael's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. Is that what he told you? That I betrayed them? He shook his head. Detective, I was 12 years old when I finally told someone what was happening in that house. In that room, Daniel was 17. He always knew what our father was doing, and he did nothing to stop it. Back at the police station, Daniel Brennan continued his version of events as Detective Wilson recorded his statement. Michael was always our father's favorite, he said with undisguised resentment. Protected him, gave him special treatment. Then Michael betrayed him, made up lies that sent him to prison. These lies, Wilson prompted. What exactly are you claiming Michael lied about? Brennan's expression darkened. Father disciplined us. Strictly, yes. But we deserved it. The room was for punishment when we disobeyed. Michael twisted it, claimed abuse, claimed other children were involved. He leaned forward. He destroyed our family with his lies at the Miller house. Tom had returned home and now sat with Sarah in their living room while the investigation in their basement continued. Rusty lay between them, finally resting but still alert to every sound from below. I can't believe this is happening, Sarah whispered. How could we not know? How could we live here for 5 years and never sense something was wrong? Tom took her hand. There's no way we could have known. The Hansons probably didn't know either. Officer Bennett appeared in the doorway. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, Detective Morales called. They've arrested Daniel Brennan for Jamie's abduction. She asked me to update you and to let you know they'll need a formal statement from both of you. Did he confess? Tom asked. Bennett nodded. He did. Apparently it's connected to a family history involving this house. His father owned it years ago. Sarah shuddered. In the sealed room? Did he explain that? Detective Morales didn't provide details. Bennett replied carefully. But forensics is treating the basement as a potential historical crime scene. At the hospital, Michael paced the hallway as he revealed his painful history to Detective Morales. My father was a monster, he said, his voice low to prevent Jamie from overhearing. The room in the basement was where he'd take us for discipline, what he called it, but it was torture. Physical abuse, psychological torment, sometimes for days. And the photographs? Morales asked, gently. Michael's single quotes' jaw tightened. Trophies of other children before us. Neighborhood kids who would visit and then move away. Suddenly, at least that's what everyone was told, you believe your father killed these children. Michael stopped pacing, meeting her gaze directly. I know he did. I helped him dig in that room when I was 9 years old. He told me we were making a special place to keep things safe. I didn't understand until years later what we were actually bearing. Morales made notes, her expression professionally neutral, despite the horror of his revelation. And Daniel, what was his involvement? Daniel idolized our father, Michael replied bitterly, followed him everywhere, wanted to be just like him. When I finally told my school counselor what was happening, Daniel was furious. Called me a traitor. He was old enough to be tried as an adult for his own involvement, spent 15 years in prison, and then was released 5 months ago. Morales finished. How did he find you? You changed your name, moved away. Michael ran a hand through his Hair, I don't know. I've been careful, kept a low profile. The only public thing I've done recently was testify at a tax fraud case for one of my clients. He paused, realization dawning. The local paper covered it, used my name and mentioned I was an accountant in Greenfield. Inside Jamie's room, the toddler had fallen asleep, the book his father had been reading still open beside him. Jennifer returned, her expression brightening at the sight of her son resting peacefully. Dr. Ramirez says we can take him home tomorrow morning, she told Michael as he re-entered the room. She's amazed at how well he's recovering. Michael embraced her tightly, holding on a moment longer than usual. Over her shoulder, he watched Jamie sleeping innocent, vulnerable, nearly taken from them because of a past he'd tried desperately to escape. Michael, Jennifer pulled back, studying his face. What's wrong? What aren't you telling me? He took a deep breath. There's something I need to explain. About why this happened to Jamie. About who I really am. At the police station, Daniel Brennan signed his confession with an unsettling smile. You know the best part? He asked Detective Wilson. Michael will never escape it now. Every time he looks at his son, he'll remember. Every time he hears about that house, he'll know the past isn't buried anymore. His smile widened. I made sure of that. 3 days after Jamie Parker's rescue, the Millers' living room had become an impromptu gathering place for two families united by extraordinary circumstances. Jamie sat on the floor with Rusty, the golden retriever, lying patiently as the toddler stroked his fur with careful, reverent hands. Emma and Noah watched from nearby, still processing the concept that the small boy before them had been buried beneath their porch less than a week ago. Gentle Jamie, Jennifer reminded softly from her seat on the couch. Just like we practiced. Gentle Jamie repeated, his touch becoming even more delicate. Good doggy, hero, doggy. Tom and Sarah exchanged glances, still adjusting to the presence of the Parkers in their home. When Michael had called requesting this meeting, they had hesitated, uncertain whether opening their house to reminders of the trauma was wise. But Sarah had eventually agreed, recognizing that healing might require connection rather than distance. Michael sat slightly apart from the others, his posture tense despite the seemingly relaxed gathering. He had spent the past days explaining his painful history to Jennifer, his childhood in this very house, the abuse he and other children had suffered, his decision to testify against his father and brother, the subsequent name change and relocation that he had hoped would bury the past forever. He's doing remarkably well, Dr. Patel had told them during Jamie's final checkup the previous day. Children his age often process trauma differently than adults. The brain has extraordinary plasticity, especially in early development. With proper support, many children can integrate traumatic experiences without long-term psychological damage. Michael watched his son with Rusty, marveling at the resilience Dr. Patel had described. Jamie showed no fear of the house that had nearly become his tomb, no lasting terror from his ordeal. Instead, he had fixated on Rusty, insisting on meeting the hero doggy who had saved him. We've been working with him using play therapy, Jennifer explained to Sarah as they observed. The children, Dr. Patel gave us special techniques to help him process what happened. He draws pictures, acts out scenarios with his toys. We're careful not to reinforce fear, but we don't dismiss his experience either. Sarah nodded, impressed by Jennifer's composure despite the horror her family had endured. And how are you doing, both of you? Jennifer's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. It's Stockholm. Difficult. The nightmares aren't Jamie's, they're mine. Every night I dream about what could have happened if, double quotes. She glanced at Rusty. If your dog hadn't found him. On the floor, Jamie had rested his head against Rusty's side, listening to the dog's heartbeat with an expression of pure contentment. Rusty remained still, seeming to understand the importance of his role in the child's healing. Michael's planning to sell our house, Jennifer continued, lowering her voice. We can't stay there now, knowing why Jamie was taken, what it represents. Across the room, Tom joined Michael, offering him a cup of coffee. How are you holding up? Michael accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. Honestly, I'm still processing everything. Learning my brother tracked me down after all these years, targeted my son to punish me for testifying. He shook his head, and then discovering Jamie was buried at my childhood home, the same house, where, He didn't finish the sentence, but Tom understood. The forensics team had completed their investigation of the sealed room the day before, confirming Michael's account. The disturbed areas in the concrete floor had revealed human remains, 3 children who had disappeared in the 1980s. Their case is long cold. I can't imagine carrying that kind of history, Tom said quietly, finding the strength to testify against your own family at 12 years old. Michael's smile was sad. I wasn't strong. I was terrified, but my school counselor, Mrs. Landunci, was the first adult who believed me, who fought for me. She's the reason I survived, the reason I was able to build a life afterward. Have you told Jamie any of this? About your connection to the house? Not yet, Michael replied. Dr. Patel says he's too young to understand the complexities. For now, we're focusing on his recovery, on making him feel safe again. Rusty suddenly lifted his head, alert to something outside. Seconds later, a knock at the door announced the arrival of Dr. Matthews, Rusty's veterinarian, who had been invited to check on his healing paws. "There's my hero patient," she greeted as Sarah led her into the living room. Rusty thumped his tail in recognition but remained beside Jamie, unwilling to abandon his self-appointed duty. Dr. Matthews knelt beside them, speaking softly to Jamie. "Is it okay if I check Rusty's paws, to make sure they're healing properly?" Jamie nodded solemnly, scooting back slightly but keeping one hand on Rusty's back. Dr. Matthews examined each paw with gentle efficiency, applying a fresh layer of healing balm to the areas that remained sensitive. "He's recovering beautifully," she reported. "No infection, good tissue regeneration. Rusty's going to be just fine." "Like Jamie," the toddler said unexpectedly, patting his own chest. "Jamie fine too." The simple statement brought tears to Jennifer's eyes. Dr. Patel had explained that children often use such declarations to reassure both themselves and the adults around them, to regain a sense of control after traumatic experiences. "Yes, sweetheart," she confirmed, moving to embrace her son. "Jamie is fine too." As the afternoon progressed, the initial awkwardness between the families gradually dissolved. Emma showed Jamie her collection of stuffed animals, while Noah demonstrated his remote control car, carefully including the younger child in their play. The adults spoke in hushed tones about the investigation, the media attention that had finally begun to wane, and the long road of healing ahead for both families. Detective Morales called Michael with an update. Daniel Brennan had been formally charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, and child endangerment. The district attorney was seeking maximum penalties, with little chance of parole given the premeditated nature of the crime and Daniel's prior convictions. They're also reopening several cold cases based on the evidence found in the basement, Morales reported. "Your testimony from childhood is being reviewed alongside the new forensic findings. There may be more victims we don't know about yet." Michael absorbed this information with grim resignation. The past he had tried so hard to escape was now fully exposed, not just to his family but to the world. News outlets had already connected the dots between the Brennan case from decades ago and Jamie's abduction, though most had respected the family's privacy enough to avoid publishing current photographs or their home address. As evening approached, the Parkers prepared to leave. Jamie, tired from the emotional day, reached for Rusty one last time. "Bye, hero doggy," he said, wrapping his arms around Rusty's neck in a gentle hug. Rusty responded by licking the boy's cheek, eliciting a giggle that seemed to lighten the room's somber atmosphere. "We'll arrange another visit soon," Jennifer promised Sarah. "I think this has been good for Jamie, for all of us." "Really?" Michael lingered in the doorway as the others moved toward the car. "Thank you," he said simply to Tom and Sarah, "for opening your home to us, after everything that's happened. And for Rusty," his voice caught, "for what he did, I don't have adequate words." Sarah smiled, glancing at Rusty who had followed them to the door. "I don't think he did it for thanks. He just did what was right, what was needed in that moment." As the Parkers drove away, Rusty stood watching until their car disappeared around the corner. Only then did he return to the living room, finally settling into a truly relaxed posture for the first time since his discovery beneath the porch. "I think he knows it's over," Tom observed. "That Jamie's safe now." Sarah wasn't so sure. The investigation had uncovered decades-old crimes, brought long-buried secrets to light, but true healing would take much longer than the few days that had passed. For Jamie, for Michael, for their own children who now understood that sometimes monsters were real. And yet, watching Rusty finally at peace, she felt a cautious hope. If a dog could sense both danger and its passing, perhaps humans too could learn to recognize when the worst was behind them, when it was safe to rest again. The morning talk show host leaned forward, her expression calibrated to convey both warmth and appropriate solemnity. And joining us today are Tom and Sarah Miller, along with their remarkable golden retriever, Rusty, who made national headlines last month after discovering a buried toddler beneath their family's porch. "Thank you all for being here." Sarah smiled nervously, one hand resting on Rusty's head. The golden retriever sat perfectly between them on the studio couch, unusually composed despite the bright lights and unfamiliar surroundings. Tom nodded acknowledgement, clearly uncomfortable with the attention but determined to tell their story. "Rusty is being called a hero across the country," the host continued. "There's even a social media campaign suggesting he receive an American Humane Hero Dog Award. How has life changed since that incredible morning?" Tom and Sarah exchanged glances. How could they possibly summarize the seismic shifts in their lives since Rusty's discovery? The media attention, the true crime podcasts, dissecting every detail of the Brennan family history, the decision to sell their house once the police investigation concluded. "It's been overwhelming," Sarah finally answered. "We never expected anything like this to happen, much less become a national story. But the support has been incredible both for our family and for the Parkers." The host nodded sympathetically. "And how is Jamie Parker doing? I understand you've maintained contact with the family." Tom took this question. "Jamie is recovering remarkably well. Children are resilient, and he's receiving excellent care." The Parkers have asked for privacy regarding specific details of his recovery, which we completely respect. What Tom didn't mention was how the Parkers had moved temporarily to his parents' a vacation cabin while they searched for a new home, how Jamie still asked to see Hero Dogi several times a week, or how Michael was working with prosecutors to ensure his brother never walked free again. "And what about Rusty?" the host asked, reaching to pet the golden retriever, who accepted the attention with dignified grace. "Did you have any indication before this that he possessed such extraordinary abilities?" Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time during the interview. "Rusty has always been special and usually perceptive, sometimes almost uncannily so. But nothing prepared us for what he did that day. The determination he showed, the understanding that something was terribly wrong. It went beyond typical dog behavior." Dr. Lisa Matthews, Rusty's veterinarian, has agreed to work with researchers studying canine cognition and scent detection, Tom added. "They believe Rusty might help us understand more about dogs' abilities to detect humans in disaster situations." The host nodded with interest. "I understand you've been approached about book deals, movie rights, even a potential documentary series about this case." "We have," Sarah acknowledged. "But that's not why we're here today. We wanted to use this platform to announce something important." The camera pulled back slightly as Sarah revealed a folder she'd been holding. "We're establishing the Rusty Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to training rescue dogs for search and recovery work, particularly focusing on finding missing children." Photographs appeared on the screen behind them, Sarah and Tom with a group of golden retrievers from a local rescue. Rusty interacting with trainers. Jamie Parker, his face thoughtfully blurred, patting Rusty during a supervised visit. "The foundation will also provide therapy dogs to children who've experienced trauma," Tom explained. "We've seen firsthand how Rusty's presence has helped Jamie process what happened to him. That kind of connection can be healing in ways traditional therapy alone sometimes can't achieve." "What a wonderful tribute," the host said warmly. "And I understand the Parkers are involved as well." Sarah nodded. "Michael Parker will serve on our board of directors. His perspective as both a survivor of childhood trauma and as Jamie's father gives him unique insight into the Foundation's mission." What went unmentioned was Michael's determination to transform his family's legacy, to replace the Brennan name's association with horror and abuse with the Parker name's connection to healing and recovery. After the interview concluded, Tom, Sarah, and Rusty were escorted to the green room where Emma and Noah waited with Tom's parents. The children immediately surrounded Rusty, who seemed relieved to be away from the cameras and back with his family. "You did great," Tom's mother assured them, "both of you. And Rusty was so well behaved. He's a natural," Sarah agreed, watching as Rusty gently accepted treats from Noah's outstretched hand. The producer already asked if he'd be willing to come back for a follow-up segment once the foundation launches officially. Tom checked his phone, which had been buzzing continuously since the interview aired. Donations are already coming in. The website's getting so much traffic it might crash. What had begun as a morning show appearance to satisfy public curiosity had transformed into something neither of them had anticipated. The beginning of a movement inspired by one dog's extraordinary act of heroism. Back at their hotel, the Millers ordered room service while Emma and Noah excitedly recounted their backstage experiences to their grandparents. Rusty lay at their feet, seemingly content despite the day's excitement. Sarah's phone rang. Jennifer Parker calling to congratulate them on the interview and the foundation announcement. "It was perfect," Jennifer said, dignified but accessible. And Rusty looked absolutely regal. "How's Jamie today?" Sarah asked, moving to a quiet corner of the hotel suite. "Good days and bad," Jennifer replied honestly. "Today's been good. He watched you on TV and got so excited seeing Rusty that he tried to hug the screen." Sarah smiled at the image. "We're flying home tomorrow. Maybe we could visit this weekend." "Jamie would love that," Jennifer said. "Actually, that's partly why I'm calling. Michael wanted me to tell you something." Sarah listened, her expression growing serious as Jennifer explained. When she rejoined the family, Tom immediately noticed her changed demeanor. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded, though her eyes were troubled. "Michael got a letter today from Daniel Brennan in prison." She lowered her voice to ensure the children wouldn't hear. It just said, "This isn't over," with an old photograph of the house. "Police don't think it's an immediate threat. Daniel is in maximum security with no possibility of parole." "But," Tom's jaw tightened, "but it's unsettling for all of us." Their gazes shifted to Rusty, who had sat up and was watching them with alert attention, as if understanding the sudden tension in their voices. "Sometimes I think he understands everything," Sarah murmured. "Maybe he does," Tom replied, "or at least more than we realize." Emma called from across the room, wanting to show them something on her tablet, photos from their last visit with Jamie, the toddler beaming as he held Rusty's leash with careful determination. "Look how happy he is," Emma said proudly. "Rusty made him better." Sarah smiled, pushing aside her concerns about Daniel Brennan's message. "They helped each other," she corrected gently. "That's what the foundation is all about, connections that heal." As evening fell, media requests continued flooding their inboxes. Producers, journalists, publishers, wanting exclusive access to Rusty's story. What they couldn't understand was that Rusty's story wasn't about one dramatic rescue. It was about everyday heroism, about the extraordinary capacity for intuition and compassion that many dismissed as just animal instinct. In the hotel room, Rusty dreamed beside Emma's bed, his paws twitching occasionally as he chased something in his sleep. Perhaps rabbits, perhaps memories of digging through soil to find a tiny hand. Whatever his canine mind processed during sleep remained his own mystery, one of countless secrets humans might never fully comprehend about their oldest companions. Outside their window, New York City continued its relentless rhythm, indifferent to the small golden dog who had briefly captured its attention. But in homes across the country, people watched replays of the morning's interview, marveling at Rusty's story, and perhaps looking at their own dogs with newfound wonder, newfound respect. How many other heroes lay sleeping at our feet? How many other extraordinary capabilities remained hidden behind loyal eyes and wagging tails, waiting for the moment when they might be needed most? 6 months later, Rusty trotted confidently through the corridors of Mercy Children's Hospital, his therapy dog vest identifying him as an official visitor. Beside him walked Sarah, carrying a bag of small stuffed golden retrievers for the children they would visit today. At 3 years old, Rusty had found his calling, bringing comfort to young patients, particularly those recovering from trauma. They paused outside a playroom where several children were gathered for what the hospital called Rusty Time, a weekly visit that had become the highlight of many young patients' stays. Among them today was 8-year-old Lily, recovering from injuries sustained in a car accident, and 10-year-old Marcus, undergoing treatment for leukemia. Both children's faces lit up when Rusty appeared in the doorway. "Rusty's here," Lily called out, her voice carrying the pure joy that only children can express so unreservedly. Sarah unclipped Rusty's leash, and the golden retriever moved with gentle purpose into the room, greeting each child with what could only be described as respectful attention. He seemed to intuitively understand which children wanted enthusiastic interaction and which needed quieter, more subdued approaches. As Rusty worked his special magic, Sarah chatted with the child life specialist who oversaw these sessions. "He's a natural," the specialist observed. "Some therapy dogs need extensive training to be this attuned to different needs, but Rusty seems to know instinctively." Sarah smiled, watching as Rusty rested his head on Marcus's lap, somehow sensing that the boy lacked energy for play today but still craved connection. "He's always been special that way, even before." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone at the hospital knew Rusty's story, how he had discovered Jamie Parker buried beneath the miller's porch, saving the toddler's life and capturing hearts nationwide in the process. Across town, Tom stood in the empty living room of their old house on Elm Street, saying a final goodbye to the home that had sheltered their family for 5 years. After months on the market, they had finally found buyers, a young couple expecting their first child, blissfully unaware of the property's notoriety. The Millers had disclosed everything, of course, but the couple seemed undeterred, focusing instead on the house's good bones and spacious yard. "Ready?" asked Michael Parker, who had volunteered to help with this final walkthrough. Tom nodded, taking a last look around. "It's strange. Despite everything that happened, there were a lot of good memories here too." Michael's expression was understanding but tinged with something darker, his own memories of this house stretching back decades further, to a childhood marked by terror rather than joy. "Sometimes places are just places," he said quietly. "It's people who make them good or bad." They walked together to the front porch, where Tom paused, looking down at the spot where Rusty had made his remarkable discovery. The lattice had been replaced, the ground beneath undisturbed for months now. To a casual observer, there was nothing to suggest what had once been hidden there. "How's Jamie doing?" Tom asked as they headed to their cars. Michael's single quotes, his face brightened. "Amazing, you wouldn't know anything had happened if you met him today. He still asks about Rusty almost daily though." "We'll bring him by this weekend," Tom promised. The kids are excited about the new house, and Sarah wants Jamie to see Rusty's new therapy dog training room at their new home across town, specifically for its distance from painful memories. And Noah were helping Jennifer Parker arrange refreshments for the small housewarming gathering planned for that evening. Jamie sat at the kitchen table, coloring a picture with intense concentration. "What are you drawing, Jamie?" Noah asked, peering over the younger boy's shoulder. Jamie held up his artwork proudly. "Rusty saving me," he explained Matt. The crayon drawing showed a golden blob, presumably Rusty, digging near a brown rectangled the porch with a small figure underneath. Noah studied the picture with the serious consideration of a 7-year-old. "That's really good," he said finally. "Rusty will like it." Jennifer watched this exchange with a mixture of amazement and gratitude. Dr. Patel had explained that Jamie's ability to process his trauma through art and storytelling was helping him integrate the experience in healthy ways. Rather than being overwhelmed by what had happened, he had constructed a narrative with Rusty as the hero, a perspective that allowed him to make sense of something that might otherwise have been psychologically devastating. The doorbell rang, and Jamie jumped up excitedly. "Rusty's here." he shouted, running toward the front door. Jennifer caught him gently. Let's check who it is first. Remember? Jamie nodded seriously. The Parkers had established new safety protocols in their home. Always check before opening doors, always verify who is calling or visiting, always maintain awareness of These weren't born from paranoia, but from the reasonable caution of a family that had experienced the unthinkable. It was indeed Sarah and Rusty returning from the hospital visit. Jamie launched himself at the golden retriever, who accepted the enthusiastic greeting with his characteristic gentle patience. Their bond had only strengthened over the months since the rescue, a connection that transcended ordinary understanding. Look what I made, Jamie said, retrieving his drawing to show Rusty, who sniffed it politely. By evening, both families had gathered in the Millers' new home, along with a few close friends who had supported them through the aftermath of Rusty's discovery. The house buzzed with conversation and laughter, deliberately focusing on future plans rather than past traumas. In the corner of the living room, Rusty lay on his new bed, surrounded by children, Mia and Noah, Jamie, and several neighborhood kids who had been fascinated by the hero dog story. He accepted their attention with dignified tolerance, occasionally catching Sarah's eye, as if to say, "See how well I'm handling this adoration?" Tom raised his glass for a toast. "Two new beginnings," he said simply, "and to the extraordinary dog who brought us all together." Glasses clinked as everyone echoed the sentiment, even the children with their juice boxes joining in the celebration. Later, as the gathering wound down, Michael found a moment alone with Tom and Sarah on the back patio. "I wanted to tell you something," he said quietly. "Daniel's appeal was denied yesterday. The court upheld his sentence. He'll remain in maximum security with no possibility of parole for at least 25 years. Sarah exhaled with relief. Though Daniel Brennan's threat from prison had proven empty, likely nothing more than a final attempt to maintain psychological control, it had cast a shadow over their sense of security. "That's good news," Tom said, "for all of us." Michael nodded, watching through the window as Jamie played with Rusty inside. "I spent so many years running from my past, trying to bury it. I never imagined it would nearly cost me my son." His voice caught slightly. "Or that a dog would be the one to save him." "Not just any dog," Sarah corrected gently. "Rusty." As if hearing his name, Rusty looked up from his place beside Jamie, his intelligent eyes meeting Sarah's through the window. In that moment, she felt the familiar wonder that had never diminished. How had they been fortunate enough to find this extraordinary animal? What confluence of genetics, instinct, and perhaps something more had created a being capable of such remarkable intuition and compassion? Some questions had no definitive answers, some connections defied simple explanation. But as Rusty returned his attention to Jamie, resting his head protectively near the boy he had saved, one truth seemed undeniable sometimes. The greatest heroes walked on four legs, asking nothing in return for their devotion except love and the occasional treat. Sometimes, when humans failed each other in the most fundamental ways, it took a golden retriever digging beneath a porch to remind us of our capacity for good, for connection, for healing. Sometimes, the smallest hands found their greatest protectors in the most unexpected places.